If you're a designer and you're looking for inspiration and not finding it, it can be really frustrating. So in this video, I want to share with you kind of 4 tips. And these are much more than just tips. They're things to remember when you are in the process of looking for inspiration at the beginning of any kind of design project. And it doesn't matter what discipline you're from. My name is Morna, if we have never met before. I'm an industrial designer who designs physical products, so all the examples are going to be those. But this runs true for any design discipline. Also, at the end of this video, I'm going to be talking about the difference between copying a design and stealing different aspects. And I'm going to be showing you examples of some of my favorite designs that have been copied and an example of my own work of how I steal aspects. So let's get into it. So the first thing to remember is that inspiration is everywhere in the world. I start with this belief because I think that whatever we believe, our mind tends to find evidence of it in the world. And so this is something that it's a good belief to have. It's something that I want my mind to do. I want my mind to find inspiration everywhere in the world. So that is sort of just my starting point. And if inspiration is like everywhere in the world, then we could also say that each thing that we look at is like a concentration of potential for inspiration. So let's just look at this Seagate hard drive for a minute, because there's many ways we could be inspired just by looking at it. Now, the first thing that I see, and you probably see it too, especially because I'm moving it around, is this surface texture and how it kind of like shimmers in the light. So that immediately is something that we could be inspired by. The surface texture actually reminds me of like a hammered metal finish, except that this is more geometric as opposed to like traditional kind of hammered metal finish is more kind of organic looking. So you could be inspired and go on a whole path of inspiration just looking at surface texture and how that really makes a rectilinear box appear much more interesting. You could be inspired by the color, this kind of gray metallic color, and how it not only speaks like metallic, the language of metallic, but also the combination with this surface texture. Like I said before, it reminds me of the hammered metal finish. So these two things combined make it reminiscent of metal. You could be inspired by the graphic identity, which is just printed on the surface of this plastic part. You could be inspired by details such as the LED right here, how it's the form of the LED, the fact that it's not super visible, like it doesn't, when the LED is not on, it kind of recedes into the background. You hardly see it. You could be inspired by that idea. You could also be inspired by the size. This size reminds me of maybe just a little bit larger than like a man's wallet. And so there might be something about that size that relates to whatever you're working on. The other thing is this back surface texture you could be inspired by, the idea of like a glossier finish. It's not super glossy, and a more matte finish. And those are finishes in the tool, in the mold that made this plastic part. It would be a specific, you would choose the mold finish here and the mold finish here, and that's how that is done. You could also be inspired just by the form, a simple rectilinear form that is, when you're thinking about how someone uses this on their desk, it's like a book. Speaking of form, I have to show you guys something, because while I was looking at this form, I came across another portable hard drive that has a similar idea in it. When we're talking about the form, one thing that is present in this form is we can see that the front part is a silver color, the back part is a black color. And the result of that combination is that overall, it makes the form feel smaller. You can imagine if the two parts were similar color, if this thing was like all black or all silver, it would feel much thicker, okay? So that's an idea. Now look at this hard drive, this WD hard drive. Check this out. Notice how they've split the form in half. It runs, you can see it on all sides, and it has no functional purpose. There's no reason to have this kind of indentation in the form, except that it breaks up the form. It makes the form feel smaller. And you can see the top half is very high gloss finish. The bottom half is this like textured, is a more matte textured finish. So I thought that was really interesting when I found it, because here you have two hard drives that have kind of the same idea. And you can see how, you know, when we're talking about inspiration, how when you look at one thing and you start to kind of go in there and ask questions about, well, why is it like that? Or what is the result of something being the way it is? You can see that like other things address those same issues, or can be kind of inspired in the same way. Now I wanted to share that with you because I think it's really easy to get into a routine where you're looking at the same things and you're looking at them in the same way. So I think in this type of video, maybe a lot of people want to just know, like, where's the cool website that I need to go to, or where's the cool place that I should go check out. And while that can be valuable, I think a better way to think about inspiration is that it's not necessarily about where you look, it's about how you look. Have you guys ever been in a situation where you've seen two people take inspiration from the exact same thing and the result is completely different? So you could argue that those two people are different people, they interpret things differently, they have different creative styles, whatever. But there's also the possibility that they've looked at that thing in different ways, different perspectives, different points of view. And that is kind of at the heart of the concept that I'm talking about here. And this leads us to the concept. How you look at something will determine what you see. Now, you may have noticed that as we're talking about, you know, all the different types of inspiration that we could find in this one thing, now depending on what we're looking at, what we're like focusing our attention on, really determines the type of inspiration that we can find. If you are looking for something specific, you will see that in other things, okay? For example, whenever I am doing form development, I go through a phase where I look at things online and around me, and I feel like I just put a filter over my eyes, and everything that I look at, I just see its form, okay? And what I'm doing is I'm trying to get ideas about form for my project. When I do this form, looking for inspiration for form development, I look at everything. Like I look at everything. Is this an appropriate form for my design project? Yes or no? No? Okay. Is this an appropriate form? Would it work? What if you turned it? Oh crap. Okay, upside down, would that work? What would it look like? I imagine it in my head and I'm like, oh, that's a pretty good idea. And then I'll save the image, okay? So if we know that how you look at something will determine what you see, the question then is like, how is that going to help us when we go to do our inspirational research? And this kind of leads into my third tip. If you are a professional designer, if you are a student of design, you probably know, or should know, that everything that we design has common ingredients in it. So For example, in all products have things like form, function, material, manufacturing process, etc. The list goes on. If you are interested in learning more about the ingredients specifically of product design, I do have a free workbook, and I'll just put a link up above. When you know what you're looking for, it brings a clarity, a purpose to your inspiration research. You are directed. I think what can happen when people are looking at it for inspiration is they'll find one idea about form, and then they find an idea about material, and then they find an idea about, surface texture, and then they find an idea about color, and it's just this very random activity. And this leads into the fourth tip, which is structure your search. So typically when I'm searching for things, I'll spend a given amount of time. Let's just say I'm going to spend an hour only looking at form. That's all I do for an hour, is just go through and look at different forms and evaluate whether or not they're appropriate for my design. And the nice thing about structuring your search, it actually kind of expands how you think about things, because all of a sudden you're having to just look at one thing, and you might not have ever considered how something could be useful, because maybe, if you just do research kind of haphazardly and, kind of all over the place, you may be missing a lot of potential ideas or ways of, thinking about something in a new and different way. So we can't really have a conversation about inspiration without talking about the difference between copying something versus what I would say stealing different aspects of something. So let's talk about that for a minute. I'd like to give you just an example of each, so we're on the same page. One of my favorite examples of copying are the cars in China. So I'm just going to put some examples of these cars, and they're pretty crazy, like just how similar these cars are to the original brand. I think a good way to define copying is when you look at the two things side by side and struggle to see the differences between them. Versus, when I say stealing aspects of something, I'd like to show you an example of something that I worked on. It's called Neo. It's like a security tag. It's similar, if you've heard of the product called Tile, it works in a similar way. Unfortunately, it came to market, and then it's kind of a long story, but it's too bad because Apple was interested in carrying it in the Apple store, and so it's too bad that things didn't work out. So anyways, back to this product. So with this product, all of the internals, the PCB board and the electronics were all set. So in terms of an overall form factor, it was really, there wasn't a lot of leeway. It was going to be some kind of rectilinear box. I actually just found these really early concepts of, 3 different ways that this rectilinear box could appear. And one of the things that was up for grabs that we did have control over was the placement of the LED. That is where I stole 2 different ideas. So the first idea was actually stolen off of Cindy Crawford's face. If I put the product and Cindy Crawford's face up on screen, can you guess what it is? I should just back up a minute. There were a few ideas that were swirling in my mind about how I wanted the product to appear. I wanted it to be like a character, in the sense that you would, always want to carry this little character with you, but I didn't want it to be very obviously anthropomorphic. So I didn't want it to look like, eyes and a mouth or something and look really like too many human traits. Just let it be more subtle. So I thought of the front of the product as a kind of face. And so the part that I stole was, I started thinking about Cindy Crawford's mole and how, she became really well known for this little kind of iconic thing on the side of, just above her mouth. For the second idea, I stole one aspect from our client's previous product. And I'm going to show this right on screen right now. Take a guess. What do you think that idea was? If you're thinking it has something to do with the shape, like the outer shape of the product, it's very similar, as you can see, to the LEDs. So I thought it might be neat to have this kind of like, even though we weren't taking any of that form factor into the new product, and for good reason, just to have this like little bit of almost legacy of what, the previous iteration of this product had been. So to bring a little bit of that history into the new product in a way that most people would never know about. So as you can see on the final product, it's placed on, in this case on the left side. And then, there's one size LED, and then there's a smaller LED reminiscent of the old product. So those are the two aspects that I stole. To be honest, this video was challenging. I reshot this video so many times trying to figure out the best way of presenting it. So I'm really curious to know, like, if you got any use out of it, but also like, maybe you have different ways of getting inspiration and they're different from mine, and let me know what those are. So we'll see you next time.